Good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock on the start of your Thursday morning. Glad you're with us for Second Cup. Listen, we've got our friend Mitch Nowakowski here with us, and he's talking about the Buffalo Common Council budget that was just amended late last night by Buffalo Common Council members. So you got questions, we got answers for you. Mitch is actually the Finance Committee chair, so this is his wheelhouse. And just full disclosure, I want to put it out there so that there's no question about it. Mitchell is one of my close friends, so I just want everyone to be aware of that. And, I'm going to still ask him the tough questions that need to be asked.
And he's still going to answer them.
But at the end of the day, I just want to make sure that everything's out in the open here.
So let's run down what you need to know as we get into this conversation, okay? So Buffalo Mayor Byron Brown had proposed about a 9% property tax hike, okay? And then the council gets the budget, takes a look at it, and then last night put forth a 4.1% hike for property tax for residential, and then about a 7% for commercial property owners. So Mitch is here to talk us through how that conversation went, and then we're going to ask you some more questions and kind of follow up with what people who are watching need to know.
Because this is a really big deal. Yes, there's a tax hike, but there's an even bigger story here. So I guess walk us through exactly what Katie was talking about. What is the conversation behind the scenes? So we'll get to this point, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm really glad to be here because as finance chair, I also really like to articulate these issues so that people understand what's going on, because oftentimes it's easy for politicians to kind of hide behind a press release and a few quotes, and they say, well, what really happened? Right. So here's what happened. So the mayor of Buffalo proposed a 9% increase in the tax levy. And the tax levy is like a pie. It's the collection of taxes. And then when that equals out, there's a tax rate for residents, and then there's a tax rate for commercial properties. So we realized that after not raising taxes for a very long time, a 9% hike would be absolutely way too high for residents to be able to have in one pool. So the council has the power to amend the budget, because if we voted it down, his would stand, and if we took no action, his would stand, and then that hike would go through. Okay. So the council is forced by charter to get in a room, work together, and to come up with something. So right now, the council voted to approve and amend the budget where residents will see a 4% hike in taxes, and commercial will see 7%. So if you're thinking, well, what does that mean, a percent? So if you have a $100,000 house that's assessed, you'll be paying about $45 more in taxes. And so you could kind of do the equalization rate. Like I figured out this morning, I'll be probably paying $65 more in city taxes a year. But what I'm trying to say now is, look, we're in a fiscal crisis. We have a large looming debt burden that's happening, that's really been growing for a large, significant amount of years. So I'm not going to say that taxes won't raise throughout the duration of other years. And that was a big fight that the council members wanted to really articulate with the mayor, that, look, we're raising taxes now, but this doesn't mean that we're home free, and that residents can see in the years that we're not going to raise them.
I just want to kind of reiterate something that you just said. We are in the city of Buffalo in a fiscal crisis. What does that mean?
So right now we have $40 million that we used in this budget that's non-reoccurring, which means we will not get that money again. They're one-shot revenues. And then we have a budget lines where the mayor has proposed expectations of what he believes he'll see in revenue that we know are not realistic. We know that cannabis revenue does not come in at what we projected. And honestly, the cannabis right now, you could see from the Governor Hochul, it's been a debacle on how to get these up and running. And remember, cannabis stores is actually, it's taxed. The local municipalities collect money from those establishments. There's overshot in sales tax in real estate. There's a hotel bed tax that has to be approved by the state of New York. They're wrapping up session in a few weeks. That has to be approved by the state.
But Mitch, a fiscal crisis, what does that mean for Katie? What does that mean for me? What does that mean for Melly, who's watching? What does that mean for somebody who lives in the city of Buffalo about services? What does that mean about continuation of services? What does a fiscal crisis look like? And, we heard David Rivera say that we could make draconian cuts.
Yeah, it means that a hard control board could come back and make the decisions for us. So that means that the city of Buffalo will not have enough revenue, enough money, enough cash on hand to meet its obligations to provide services if we do not get a windfall of money. So I project that we're probably in a ballooned $50 to $60 million hole, and we need catastrophic amounts of money to be able to level out this budget. So when we don't have them, it's like, think about it at your home. You don't have enough money in revenue. You can't pay your mortgage. You can't pay your light bill. You can't get groceries. Just like the city of Buffalo, we do not have enough revenue to meet our expenses. That means that's a reduction in services.
Okay, how did we get here? How are we hearing about this now? How did we get here? And have we not been hearing possible fiscal crisis over the past, let's say, 5 years, 10 years?
That's a really good point. So we were here, I got elected in 2019, and was as a staffer, I knew that these budgeting practices that were happening in the city were really a farce, and that they weren't good. And so in 2020, we faced a $52 million budget hole. But we were saved by the American Rescue Plan when Joe Biden came in, which gave local municipalities large tranches of money. So we were halfway in between our budget cycle when we got that windfall of money. So yes, it went to projects. Yes, it went to relief to residents, but it also went to budget holes, and it just kicked this can further down the road.
Shanta's right. I mean, so what you're saying is that there's a mismanagement of funding here. There's a mismanagement of money. As you heard David Rivera also say that this has been basically rubber stamped for many, many years. Yet David Rivera has been in the Common Council for many, many years. So, I mean, is he looking in the mirror here?
That's where you saw a lot of fights on the floor. I mean, you see, Councilmember Bowman's and myself, who saw the red light that when we first got elected, and we passed a reserve fund policy to have savings to meet this day. We were able to build up the savings, and now the savings that we built when we first got elected are being used to fill these budget holes. And oftentimes I feel like, and I've even said where I feel like sometimes people walk around with a bandana over their eyes without ripping off the Band-Aid and saying we have serious problems. And ultimately, taxes were not raised responsibly for 13 years. So the mayor says, well, I needed to keep taxes low, and I needed to do that to get business in. Okay, that's fair. But for 13 years, I mean, the cost of fuel, contracts, claims against the city, investment in equipment, you name it, all that goes up and revenue stays stagnant. Then you're using your savings to fill in those holes. And that's not responsible. And for a large part, about 15 years, 15 budget cycles before I was elected, did that.
So what? I just want to make sure that we're clear here. Does the city of Buffalo still have savings?
Right now, the savings, the unrestricted funds, the unassigned that we passed a local law to restrain the mayor to build up, he placed $14.9 million, which is almost a majority of that funding in this budget now to be able to balance it.
And so we're talking, that's like our reserve money there.
To be used.
Yes. And I don't want anyone to confuse the public. So they'll say, well, we have 30 days of operating expenses. There's an emergency stabilization fund. So if something catastrophic happened in the city of Buffalo, we have catastrophic funds to be able to face that. We have the unassigned is basically a flexible savings account to meet unexpected needs that happen. That we help build up is drained. So
as you look forward to the future here, and I know, okay, so now we're seeing this property tax hike that you've put forward, the mayor put forward one, you put forward this, so we'll see, if that gets approved, right, because he has to sign off here. As we move forward, though, if things don't change or we don't keep making these adjustments, do you see cuts happening in the city, and where would you see that happening?
I see next year between our fiscal, because our fiscal budget goes from July 1st to July 1st, so it kicks in July. I see halfway in next year, if we do not get large sums of revenue, I start seeing cuts happening then. And the fact where I get really aggravated with is where the council and the mayor should be working together to come up to fill these holes. A state control board can come in and just start making cuts themselves. And it's happened 20 years ago. I'm a student of history. I don't want to repeat it. And so that's why I've used a large part of my career to start speaking out about this, passing laws to be able to get fiscally sustainable. And that's where I am very happy that the council was able to work to negotiate the residential relief down, but I'm still not happy. I'm barely happy.
Why aren't you happy at this point? I mean, dig into this a little bit, Mitch, because realistically, taxes for business property owners who own a business, if they own the property, are going up 7%. That can't be good for business. That can't be good for a business-friendly city. Taxes for households are going up 4%. I mean, we're getting the money in, but what would make you happy?
Well, so I think that, because the way I look at it is, yes, we provided relief and that makes me happy. But also, if we get whiplash in a year and then we have a reduction in services, residents are going to say, wait a minute, I'm paying more. You're giving me more tax increases. But now you're saying you're so structurally deficient, you're starting to cut services. What's going on here? So really, I don't want people to be basically rused by this.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to clarify it too, because what I said was that a 7% hike does not make a business property owner happy. If I'm thinking I'm coming into the city of Buffalo, and, I'm just going to kind of think here, if I'm the Rosie's that's building a brand new facility on the west side, and I say, oh, my taxes are going to go up 7%, but I'm just investing all of this money, fixing up the building and bringing in new business to the west side, but now I'm being charged 7% more in my taxes, like that does not make me happy as a business owner.
What ultimately happens is someone makes it up. Someone has to eat that. So it usually is inflicted on renters or it's inflicted on customers. And that's why it was so important for us to reduce that rate so that we don't see, because this city, we live in an urban area. We live in a city. We have 50% of our folks are renters. So it's really important that we are able to not inflict so much pain so quickly. But I also, I have to take the unpopular stances. It's fee for service. You kind of get what you pay for. I mean, when you don't have revenue and people aren't paying an equitable share, then we don't have the revenue to replace police cars, fire, to invest in parks, to be able to get infrastructure improvements, lighting, you name it. That money has to come from somewhere.
Now, where would you, let's say, we're a year or two down the road here, and where would you foresee cuts being made right off the bat? Like what goes first, I guess? As a city resident, that's what I want to know, right? If something has to get cut, what goes first? How do you decide?
Non-essential services and non-essential employees. So, I think that you would start with, amenities that people enjoy the most. So parks, services like that. The last down the line that you'd want to get to is police and fire.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a possibility?
The control board has done that before.
Mitch, walk me through the conversation with the mayor. Where is this money coming from? You're saying $60 million feasibly. He's saying $40 million. Realistically, there are tens of millions of dollars that need to be accounted for and made up. Where does this money come from?
That's the question. That's $1 million at hand question, or $60 million budget or question at hand. So the way that our municipal budget works is that we basically, it makes up and comprises of a lot of different revenue sources. So it comes from sales tax revenue, it comes from city resident tax, it comes from state aid, county aid, federal aid. And to be fair, state aid has remained flat up until this year for 12 years. We were able to get $5 million more, but let's face it, $60 million budget, $5 million increase, we still have that large gap. So right now, the mayor is saying that, look, Erie County needs to give the city of Buffalo its fair share of sales tax. We need to renegotiate that. They're saying that, this hotel bad tax, where people that are coming into using our hotels are also using our services too. So the city of Buffalo needs to get their fair share. We need an increase in state aim. And we need to get creative on other sources.
Wow.
So what's the creativity factor looking like here? Where do you save the money?
Are there grants? Like my mind starts thinking, is there grants we can apply for? Is there federal funding that is possible?
Well, so I regurgitated a talking point yesterday that made me livid and say, well, let's get creative. How do we get creative on this? Municipal budgets are not sexy. This is what this is made up of. It's fee for service. You collect it from fees from parking, or from taxes, or from aid packages, or from revenue streams like cannabis which could be a large revenue stream for the city of Buffalo. That's the fact of where we're at. And
so people need to start smoking more weed.
Legally and regulated. So that's what I keep saying. I was like, wait a minute, who is smoking unregulated marijuana right now on the council? Because we can't get that creative to make this up. But also, just to do that. But we have a lot of illegal cannabis shops, and we've even projected in the council the amount of money that we are losing by having illegal cannabis shops.
How much?
If you ask Majority Leader Halton Pope, she probably thinks it's a neighboring 20 million.
Wow, $20 million?
That we could be missing out, or we could buy through fines. So the Office of Cannabis Management. So I really want to get this couple points home just as a public official. First of all, the consumption of marijuana is legal. And if you're going to consume, I'd rather you to go to a licensed cannabis store. It's regulated, it's safe, you know what you're consuming. That is why you need to go to regulated stores, not only just for safer consumption, but ultimately for it being accounted for. But these illegal shops basically deter a lot of folks from going into licensed establishments that ultimately all those tax revenue end up going to the local municipality.
Should we be seeing a big crackdown on this? Like, would you like to see Buffalo police start a crackdown? Like, who starts that crackdown then?
The Office of Cannabis Management, and you'll start seeing a large push after the negotiations. You'll probably see it from Majority Leader Halton Pope, who worked for Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes, and she helped write that law. So she knows that, and you're going to start seeing a large crackdown, and we're going to be asking local authorities to start fining owners and start getting this in order here.
So two things, Mitch. We had been talking about this, and we know this for a fact, and people are bringing this up. Common Council getting a raise, the mayor getting a raise. At what point do either of these two places start cutting?
Yeah, so if for elected officials, it's a fair question, and people think that I would run away from it. It is what it is. My salary is a public thing. So per the charter has which I think that it needs to be redone with the way it is. I don't think people should be voting on their own salaries. But basically the commission that sets those salaries per the charter has to meet on a regular basis, because it's kind of like the taxes. If you don't keep meeting on a regular basis, you don't keep having this conversation, then you start seeing large hikes. So that commission made a recommendation and submitted it to the council for consideration. Think about this. For the longest time, before I was elected, council members made $50,000, and it hadn't been moved in 25 years. So that's why you saw such a catastrophic jump. We got to stop doing that. We got, because oftentimes governments say, "Oh, let's just delay. Let's not handle this. I don't know what to tell my constituents. They might ask me a tough question." Cut it out. You have to be able to get elected, make tough decisions, and articulate to folks why this happens, why we have a charter, why we have rules, and how we got here.
So I just want to push you on this a little bit further. Does the mayor need to start making cuts in his own office?
Yes, we need to start absolutely making cuts now, and not only just in his own office, unilaterally, because that was where my frustration yesterday really came on the council floor. In the sense, one member said, "Well, why cut it now? We'll cut it when we need to, when we get to that point." That just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I just don't understand why we have to wait until the problem hits us in the face before we start making cuts.
Yeah, it's like being proactive, it sounds like.
I have a couple questions that I want to bring in from some of the people who are watching right now. So one of our viewers asking, how do you know if a cannabis store in the city of Buffalo is regulated? Because there are so many of them. So how would you know?
Love that question. So every regulated store is supposed to have a sticker from the state that's in front. And honestly, there's not that many. So a majority of them are actually in my district. You have Dank on Main Street. You have one on Allen Street. You have one, I think, in North Buffalo. So there's only really a few of like actually legalized cannabis stores. Mind you, I drive around my district. Look, I'm in a Polo. I'll be driving around my district like in a combat vehicle, looking at things and making sure everything's right. So I know, and our constituents call in. Now being elected official is a lot different. I mean, people tweet, text, call, email 311.
Right.
So they
24-hour call.
24-hour call. So we get that information and then we go out there. And block clubs are also, really good at saying, "Hey, I know this is happening." I mean, Rashid Wyatt was in the university district and walked in with constituents and said, "Hey, look, we know you're not licensed here. There's no sticker in the store. We know that you're selling, unlicensed cannabis. I mean, we just saw it with our own eyes." And the fact of the matter is we can't just, where I get frustrated is we have rules and regulation to live in a healthy and safe society in the city of Buffalo. We got to start cracking down here. You got to adhere to rules.
Here's another question. Anita's wondering, what about New York State lottery money? Would that be a possibility? She knows it used to go to schools. She's just wondering if that would be able to fill any sort of hole.
Good question. So that is basically with cannabis sales. They basically mimic that from the lottery. So in the state level, since the lottery is it regulates the lottery, they keep the money, and that's how they actually fund schools.
Okay.
Mitch, this is interesting from James. People don't earn enough to pay more taxes. And one thing Zanetta said yesterday, Zanetta Everhart, councilwoman for the Maston district, was that this would affect the poor. You even echoed that sentiment drastically, saying that had a 9% tax increase gone into effect, the poor would have been instantly affected. And I want to play what Zanetta had to say yesterday. Listen.
What has happened in these chambers is nonsense. I'm just gonna be honest. I don't know how this has been carrying on for all these years. I am absolutely angry on behalf of the residents of the Maston district at the way this has been carried out for them.
The reality is people who live in Zanetta's district, in the Maston district, are among some of the lowest income in the entire city. A 4% increase might drastically affect them too. How do we mitigate those kinds of circumstances for the people who are trying to build generational wealth, for the people who are renting in perhaps at the brink of unaffordability? How do we mitigate these people from being impacted here?
First things first, folks and residents that own their homes need to make sure that they are up to date on all their exemptions, whether you are a senior, whether you are a veteran, whether you are low income. You cannot leave money on the table. You need to go to City Hall, you need to meet your council member, and you need to make sure that if you qualify for these programs, that you're signed up, number one. Number two, the second kind of follow-up to what Zanetta said was what I felt is that if you have a reduction in cut in services because we don't have revenue, the poor is inflicted first.
Mm-hmm.
So that's worse response time for residents that are in struggling neighborhoods. That means that they don't have access to their parks and amenities. So oftentimes, when we have a reduction in services, they face the blunder. And multiple things could be true at the same time. We could have a serious revenue problem. We didn't raise taxes for so long, where taxes have a compounding effect. Where if we did it responsibly, and the mayor proposed, 0.5% every other year. That stuff would compound, people wouldn't feel it, and they also ultimately wouldn't be paying more because taxes it's an equalization rate. There's a methodology that goes into how you disperse the levy, which is the pie.
Okay, so there is a part that is on everybody to make sure that they are in those programs that could potentially help them. We're talking about seniors who could be veterans.
That's low income.
Low income. So that due diligence is a little bit on all of us too. It's like the STAR exemption, right? When you
Yes.
own a house and you have to go through that process.
Katie, I have seniors in my district that come to me and they say, council member, I'm 70-some years old. I go, oh, are you on STAR? They go, no. I'm like, oh my goodness. Like you've probably left thousands of dollars of tax burden on the table.
Well, Lynn has a great question. Is there a list of how you can apply for these exemptions, or is there somebody who can help?
There is. So in City Hall, number one, the first line of response is 311. The second, where a large part of these exemptions for people that qualify are usually on the first floor in the Department of Taxation and Assessment. And then third is always reach out to your council member.
Okay.
I just want to go back. What has your conversation with the mayor been about cutting staff within the administration and then beyond, even through services?
I used my due diligence in the council and channeled that through the council president. I was told no.
Why is that?
No to potential staff cuts right now in the mayor's office.
or general cuts. I mean, to me, even if we don't, and I understand, I don't take cutting live bodies seriously. These are people that have kids and have to pay mortgages, and that's very serious. I wanted to see a reduction in something because I'd rather us do something responsible now and have restraint now before we hit a wall than hit the wall.
And are we at the wall right now? Are we hitting it?
I would say halfway through our fiscal year next year. When those revenues shore up, and we can't, because remember in 25, this year is the last year the city of Buffalo can use ARP stimulus dollars.
Right.
So all of those dollars that are used to balance the budget have to be done by the end of this year, thus removing that from our cash flow.
Sherry says, stop wasting money on speed bumps. That'll save money to the city. On one point, she might have a point because, we know fire engines are affected every time they go over a speed bump. It lowers response times. We just heard that from the fire commissioner.
I have to laugh a little bit. So, because there has to be some levity. So in my district, speed bumps are polarizing. You get people that are demanding them. One person said, council member, I'm going to throw myself on the street until we get those bumps. And some people absolutely hate them.
Right.
It's a polarizing issue. And the fact of the matter is some council members actually really push this, hence why we're seeing this. I don't want to call anyone out specifically that was theirs. But ultimately, it's like one of those tough things about being elected officials, because oftentimes people want you to almost legislate morality. If someone's speeding is because they're speeding, we should go after the speeders. I mean, you know what I mean?
Anita says, we already too late to start being responsible. It's time to dig out. How do we?
Atta girl. That's where I feel.
Yeah. And it seems like this is going to be a huge problem. We are in a fiscal emergency, is what you're saying.
Correct.
And people who've lived in the city for a long time can recall the last time that we went through something very similar.
And my record has maintained for 4 years that I saw this coming, because basically, like I like to say on the council floor, it's like elementary school when you're doing a graph and you say, well, this goes up. Okay, well, this stays the same. Well, there's this gap here. I mean, it's really not that hard or complex. And I've been shouting this from the rooftops. I've passed legislation to do this. And now I'm not going to sit here and say, I'm going to hold my breath and walk around with my eyes closed.
Mitch Nowakowski is the city's city common council finance chair. This is your wheelhouse. This is your kind of expertise. So we thank you so much for joining us and being with us to answer some questions.
This, of course, something we'll continue to keep covering for you and see how everything moves forward and how it impacts you.
Katie, I just want to say, even if I'm hanging out with it, he will ask me the tough questions. He gets it for free, too.
Believe me, I know. Mitch, I've been there too. Yeah.
My friend, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you for joining us for Second Cup. Hope we were able to help you out this morning and give you some information, really important information, to say the least.
For sure. And we'll see you back here tomorrow morning for Friday, 8
Have a great
o'clock.
day.